Am I recording?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stefan, welcome.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Salam. Namaste. Hoe gaan het? Welcome to Future Ed. Welcome to our online foundation course for IELTS. This is for you if you are new to the IELTS test, and certainly it's a good foundation if you want to just revise and pick up on your basics, just brush up. So today we're going to have a look at a sneak peek into pie charts. We're going to have a look at pie chart language, and we're going to have a look at language to describe percentages. So you may want to take some notes or some screenshots. I advise you do, because I'm going to be giving you vocabulary and grammar structures along the way, and we'll be referring back to those, and I will be giving you little tests throughout this lesson. So pie charts, what do I have to do? Well, when we get a pie chart, we need to review the data, pull out the main points, and write a short report. And we need to say what piece of the pie every category gets. And we need to be able to do this in 150 words and in 20 minutes. And this test comes towards the end of the afternoon, usually around about 4 o'clock. And you've been writing for 2 hours by that time. And you may have been at the test centre to do your speaking test much earlier on in the day. So it's a long day and you're getting tired. So I've worked out a very simple formula, and I suggest that you do the same steps every single time you practice a simple formula that I'm going to give you, and it's going to make it quicker and it's going to make it easier for you to construct your report. So let's have a look. What do we have to do to achieve a higher band score for our pie chart report? Once again, as with the line graphs, the collocation is very, very tight. So there are certain structures that you can use again and again, and variations which I'm going to show you, and you really don't need to deviate from this. So once you've got this basic language, they're actually quite simple. So what do you think will be important? Well, first of all, once again, we need to report the facts and the figures. No opinions are necessary for our task one, so we don't have to think of ideas. All the information is given to us in the pie chart. Our units are always percentages, and we need to vary our grammar structure. And today we're going to have a look at active and passive form, and we're also going to have a look at making comparisons. Sometimes we need vocabulary to talk about change over time. If our pie chart gives us dates, or perhaps we have 2 pie charts with 2 different dates, and then we're going to use the language that we did in our line graphs to talk about change over time. So that language that we did in our lesson 1 and 2 of line graphs is really fundamental and carries through to all our different types of graphs and charts. We'll be doing bar graphs next, and we can certainly use this language of change over time for bar graphs, and then 2 tables.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
So what movie have you seen recently? Would you recommend it? What genre was it? Was it an action movie? or an adventure, or a comedy, or a drama? Have a look at the list on your left-hand side, or so that on your right-hand side on the screen. There is a list of different movie genres. What genre do you think is missing from the list below? I'll give you a minute to read through that. So recently I saw the movie Rams, and it was a great movie. It had some humor in it. It was full of tension and drama, and I think it was a tragedy too. There was a lot of these sheep got very sick, a bit like COVID, and had to be put down. But it had a happy ending, and it was a really interesting insight into farming in the outback in Australia. Have a look at the vocabulary for our 12 different genres in film. And there we can see horror and science fiction were missing in the previous list. I think they referred to it as sci-fi, and here I'm giving you the full extension, and you can use both. Show the examiner that you can use both. Okay. Good. So if you'd like to make a screenshot of this, just make sure you've got this vocabulary, because you're going to use it later on in this lesson. So let's start. When we get our pie chart, in our exam, in our test, what are we going to do? And as I mentioned, I've worked out a simple system through teaching over 20 years. And I give you 5 questions. Ask yourself 5 questions. Each of these questions is really important because it's designed to make sure that you get one of those 4 scores that the examiner is going to give you in your writing. So once again, question 1, what's the topic? Question 2, what's the highest percentage? Followed by, what's the lowest? And is there anything the same, or is there anything similar that we can compare? So how did you answer? What's the topic? Our topic is favorite type of movie. And notice how I've paraphrased that. I've turned that into the popularity of movie genres. What's the highest percentage? The most popular is romance, followed by the second most popular, which is action. And what's the lowest or the least favorite? The least favorite or the least popular is drama. Anything similar? Did you notice that sci-fi and comedy are equally popular? So once again, make a quick screenshot of that. I'll give you a minute to jot down some of that vocabulary. And as you can see, we're looking at most popular, second most popular, least popular or least favorite, equally popular. There's my superlative, isn't it? My superlative to make comparisons. So what's going to get me a higher band score? Why did I ask these questions? Topic. Okay, we want to write on topic, and we want to use topic-specific vocabulary, and that's going to help me to score in my TF or my task fulfillment, as well as get me a higher vocabulary score. If I'm talking about the highest, there again, if I can pull out the data accurately, once again, I'm going to score on my task fulfillment. And when I write, I'm going to be using my grammar of superlatives. And that's going to help me get a higher grammar score if I can use those accurately. Followed by, once again, I'm reviewing and organizing the data. That's going to help me get my high task fulfillment score. And of course, once again, vocabulary and grammar. And the lowest, once again, is going to assist me get my task fulfillment and my vocabulary score. There I'm contrasting and once again using superlatives. Anything similar? Well, once again, I'm looking to be able to compare two things. And once again, that's going to assist me with get a better grammar score if I can display in my writing that I can compare, and of course, task fulfillment. And then finally, we're looking at my structure and my use of linkers. How do I link my sentences? How do I make my essay organized, easy to read, easy to understand? How do I make my writing flow well? That is my fourth mark, my CC mark, and that's about my structure and using linkers. So now ask yourself, how can I vary this given vocabulary? I don't know. I want you to brainstorm and add synonyms or similar phrases. See if you can come up with synonyms to talk about your favorite, and see if you can come up with the movie, the word, the favorite movie, like keen on, or popular, the most popular. And see if you can come up with some synonyms to write about different types of movies. So for example, we might talk about sci-fi or science fiction. I'll give you a minute to think about those. Okay, let's check. Right. There we go. So we could talk about the favorite movie or the most popular movies, or most people were keen on, or most people preferred, most people enjoyed, or would select, or would choose. And then, of course, our least favorite movie or genre. Let's talk about types of movies. Can we vary this language in any way? Did you come up with sci-fi, science fiction? A comedy we could extend into many people enjoyed a film that made them laugh, or a love story. And of course, we could also change the word movie for film. So once again, I suggest you make a screenshot or just jot down new words that you would like to add to your vocabulary book, because later on, you're going to write a pie chart. You're going to practice writing a pie chart using this language. So now let's have a look at more vocabulary. Very specific vocabulary that we can use to describe pie charts. And as you can see, we're talking about fractions or percentages here. So our percentages transfer into a fraction. And you've probably heard of these before. Once again, do take a screenshot. This is very useful vocabulary, and you do want to use it. It will certainly help you to express in a pie chart. A 10% or a tenth, or we could say 1/10. 20%, a fifth or 1/5. 25% is obviously a quarter or 1/4. 33 and a third. 33% is, we could talk about a third. 50% is obviously half. And notice here, we don't say a half. With every other fraction, we can use a or one, or when we get to 75%, 3/4. But with half, we have no article. So here's my finer points of accuracy, especially if I want to get that 7. If we're talking about 90 or 95%, we can use language like the vast majority of, and of course 100% is all or everyone, but it's very unlikely that you'll get a graph with everyone. So these fractions versus percentages give me an opportunity to avoid repeating percentage, percentage, percentage. But the examiner doesn't always make it that simple. So when we use vocabulary to describe amounts, the amounts given in a pie chart are not always equally clear as those that we've looked at already. Sometimes the examiner will give me slightly more unspecific figures, and this is a good opportunity for me because I can then display my vocabulary. So have a look at the expressions. It's 22%. We're talking about slightly more than a fifth. Or 31%, slightly less than a third. 60% would be more than half. And 68% would be just over 2/3. So once again, make a screenshot or just pause the video and jot these down. Now I'll give you an opportunity to just practice writing the following amounts. Just take a minute and extend your 19%. Those percentages on the left-hand side, extend those. I've given you the examples that you can use on the right-hand side. You need more time? Let's move on. Check your answers and see 2 more. So gosh. I'm not quite sure my slides aren't aligning when we transfer them to different computers. But there we have slightly less than a fifth, slightly more than a third. Have a look at this, just less than, or just under, or I could say just below. So once again, take a screenshot of that. These are all ways I can vary my vocabulary. And as you can see, it also helps me to bump up my word count. Now let's look at another pie chart and let's vary this vocabulary. We're going to look at this example in the class with vocabulary and grammar, and then I'm going to ask you to write your pie chart about the movie genres yourself once you've looked at this language and learned it and practiced it. So let's have a look at our topic. The pie chart shows the contents of the average New Zealand dustbin. We're going to review our notes and then ask the 5 questions. And then we're going to look at how to vary vocabulary. And then we're going to look at the main points. So I'm going to give you a chance now to look at the graph, look at the pie chart, and ask yourself the 5 questions. Can you remember them? And let's move on. Shall we just revise that? Do you need to? Look on this slide now. How can I vary my vocabulary? So have a look at the word dustbin. You want to think of other ways we can talk about a dustbin or rubbish, a rubbish bin, rubbish, waste. See if you can think of a few more. See if you can think about verbs. What do we do with rubbish? For example, we throw rubbish away. And then we're going to be looking at these different components. How can I vary ways to talk about plastic or paper or cloth? I'll give you a minute. See if you can think of some other ways to talk about a rubbish or a rubbish bin. Hello, Paul. Welcome. We're looking at pie charts tonight. And we've just had a look at a pie chart, and the topic, the title is The Contents of the Average Kiwi Dustbin. And we're just having a look at how we can extend our vocabulary. And this is a little technique that you can do right at the beginning before you start writing your pie chart. Ask yourself 5 questions. Review the data, extract the main points, and then think about vocabulary. How can I vary my vocabulary? Make notes. You could take about 5 minutes to do this, and then you're going to be much better equipped to actually go straight into your writing. So these are some of those that I could think of. Did you have something on the list that I didn't think of? You can just type it in the chat box. So that we have a rubbish bin or a bin. The American word is trash, a trash can. And we throw away rubbish, or we call it waste. Another word is refuse. And there we are, some verbs. We throw away rubbish, or we discard rubbish, or we throw out rubbish, or we put out the rubbish. And have a look at how I've taken a little bit of liberty here to extend my word plastic. You could talk about plastic milk cartons, for example. If we're talking about paper, we could talk about newspapers and magazines. Or we could talk about food waste would be food scraps or wasted food. So we can find ways to just tweak this language a little bit so that we're not just talking about paper, paper, paper. Okay. Our next step is we're going to have a look at our sentence order. We're going to have a look at our structure. And we're going to look at how we can use active and then sometimes passive. So let's get this right, because this is one way that we can vary our writing. It gives us a nicer style, and it's going to give us higher marks because we're not just talking about paper accounts for A, and newspapers account for B, and glass accounts for C. We want to vary our sentence structure as well as our vocabulary. So I suggest you take a screenshot of this if you are able, or I'll give you a minute just to jot it down. But let's have a look at the active verbs that we use. So we could talk about paper accounts for 33% of waste. And do note the prepositions. But if we're talking about newspapers, which are countable, we're going to talk about newspapers account for. So watch that third person singular. This is probably one of the biggest mistakes that students make. It's one of the most difficult things to iron out. But if you're aware of it and you practice looking for this, you practice noting this, you can actually edit your own writing and make sure that you've got the correct form of the verb. Then we would talk about glass, uncountable. Glass comprises just under 1/3 of rubbish. But if we wanted to take a little bit of liberty, we could talk about glass bottles to vary our vocabulary, and we would then say glass bottles comprise of. I should have dropped the of there. Comprises, we don't actually have a preposition. We just talk about glass comprises just under 1/3 of rubbish. Glass bottles comprise of just under 1/3. There's another verb that we can use. So we've got 3 powerful verbs here. Metal makes up, which is simply means comprises. Have a look at how I've extended metal. I've taken a little liberty here. Tin cans, we know they're metal. All right. Now, when I use this verb consists of, notice how my object becomes my subject. So now I need to say 33% of rubbish consists of paper. And have a look at this verb. This is a verb that I cannot use in the active verb. We can't say paper composes of, but we can say that 33% of rubbish is composed of paper. Is composed of paper. And that takes me to my passive form. So let's look at the next slide. So here we're looking at my verb in the passive form. And there it is. 68% of waste is comprised of paper. Over 2/3 of waste is comprised of glass bottles. Slightly more than 2/3 of waste is made up of metal. So those are the three verbs that I can use in my passive form. But I can't say is consisted of or is accounted for. Those verbs I can only use in the active form. So this is important to note. When you're writing, make sure you know which verbs you can use in active and which verbs you can use in the passive form. So here we've got them together. I'm just going to extend that. So on the one side, we've got my verb in the passive form. And on the other side, we've got my verb in the active form. So once again, I suggest you make a screenshot of this and write these sentences, write these verbs again and again in simple sentences so that you get them really accurate and you can write them really fast. So that's putting together my active table and my passive table. And once again, you can see the words, the verbs that I can't use in my passive is consisted of. We can't say that. We can't say is accounted for. And we can't say composes of. That one needs to be in the passive form. So now, have a look at this. I've extended the vocabulary we've done and I've put it into simple sentences. And now what I want you to do is I want you to see if you can fill in this gap full. I'm going to give you a few minutes, refer back to your notes, and fill the words in the gaps. I'll give you one more minute. 10 more seconds. Good. And stop. Okay, how did you go? Right, so these are very simple sentences. And let's have a look at how you did. Let's have a look at this word respectively. What does respective mean? And I'm just going to enlarge this so I can read it myself. There we go. I've copied a dictionary definition for you. Respectively, we can use respectively when we're talking about precisely the order given. So sequence, firstly, secondly, thirdly. And we use respectively when we're talking about two or more things. When we refer to two or more things in the sentence. So words that we've previously mentioned. So for example, Joe and Bob escorted Betty and Alice, respectively. So in other words, Joe escorted Betty and Bob escorted Alice. Oh, what happened there? Now I had an example there, but that seems to have disappeared into the black. So I might have to put that up at a later stage or attach it as a document. But really, I just wanted to demonstrate one or two examples and get you to practice one, because this is a really useful word. But we'll have a look at it again. So check your answers to the gap fill. I'll read that to you so you can practice your listening. The pie chart reveals, on average, how much rubbish the typical New Zealander throws away. The largest percentage of Kiwi waste comprises of old newspapers at 33%, or I could say at slightly less than 1/3 of the contents of the rubbish bin. The amount of waste paper thrown out is closely followed by discarded plastic, which makes up slightly more than 1/4, or 27%, of New Zealand's rubbish or trash. Food is the third biggest component found in the Aotearoa bins, accounting for 18%, while glass comprises 1/10 of items that have been discarded. And finally, metal and cloth account for the remaining percentage of rubbish put out at 7% and 5% respectively. So let's have a look. In my second sentence, my second paragraph, if you like, I've got both 33%. I need to select just one of these. The largest percentage of Kiwi waste comprises of old newspapers at slightly less than 1/3. Or I could say 33%, but I don't want to write my entire graph going, say, papers at 33% and glass at 28% and tin at 19%. I don't want to just talk about my percentages, so we want to vary them. But have a look at how I've handled it in the next sentence. When I put it this way, I can sometimes, and I would suggest you do it maybe once in your writing, put your percentage in brackets. So the amount of waste paper thrown out is closely followed by discarded plastic, which makes up slightly more than 1/4, in brackets 27%, of New Zealand's trash. So you can do that once Now have a look at what I've done in the next paragraph. I've talked about food or food scraps. Food is or food scraps are the third biggest component found in, now we don't expect you to know this word Aotearoa, but what I've done is I've just popped it in. It's extreme, but can you see how I've varied my vocabulary? I've spoken about New Zealander. I've changed it from the country New Zealand to the person, the New Zealander. Can you see how I mentioned in the next paragraph, I spoke about New Zealand's trash. And then finally, I think I had Kiwi, the largest percentage of Kiwi waste. And this one's really pedantic. Nobody expects you to be able to do this, but I've put it in anyway. So it's found in Kiwi bins or New Zealand bins. And once again, we'll have a look at this structure, accounting for 18%, while glass comprises. There's my linker, and we'll look further at those in the next lesson. And once again, finally, metal and cloth account for the remaining percentage of rubbish put out. Or I could say simply account for the remaining percentage at 7% and 5%. But I can extend my writing a little bit. I can add a few more words by including the remaining percentage of rubbish put out or rubbish thrown away. That just helps me to bump up my word count. So now I want you to have a look at this piece of writing, and I want you to decide which verbs are active and which verbs are passive. So once again, just read through it. And if you've got two different color pens or highlighters, you could highlight your active verbs in one color and your passive verbs in another color, or simply circle them with a pen, a red pen or a blue pen if you can. And once again, I'll give you 2 minutes to just read through that and select your verbs. And I'll stop you there. And let's have a look. Does your list look something like this? So there are all my active verbs. Throws away, which wasn't actually in the text, but I've just extended that. I think we had was thrown away or is thrown away. Makes up X percentage. Food is the third biggest component. And notice the tense in this particular pie chart, because they haven't given us a time. And therefore, we're going to just be talking in our present tense. We report the facts in the present tense. Metal and cloth account for. And then on the passive side, rubbish or waste that is thrown away. The biggest component, have a look at this one, the biggest component found, or the biggest component that is found. That is found is actually my passive. Now have a look at this one, and we spoke about what is shown in the graph, and it can be seen that. It can be seen that. So this is another way that I can include the passive, is by just introducing my next paragraph with a phrase like that. Oh, what's that doing there? That shouldn't be there. Is comprised of, that's a typo. Make a note. Is comprised of, is closely followed by. Now have a look at this one. These were actually highlighted, but my slides are being corrupted. Have a look at this one. Closely followed by discarded plastic. And in sentence number 8, items that have been discarded. So in sentence number 8, have a look at the tense. I'm actually using my present perfect tense here. And my meaning is result, items that have been discarded. And so, result, they're in the trash can and they're now part of a statistic. So there it is, my have been for my passive, discarded, third form of the verb. But have another look at sentence number 7, closely followed by discarded plastic. So whereas in sentence number 8, I'm using discarded as my verb, when I rephrase it, discarded plastic, it becomes my adjective in a way, doesn't it? It's telling me more about the plastic. So that's another way that we're going to practice extending our sentences. And if I use a sentence like this, items that have been discarded, I'm actually showing the examiner that I can use my present perfect passive. So yet another variation. And then once again, rubbish, put out, or rubbish that is put out. And once again, that's my passive too. And we drop that is, as we did in sentence number 2, the component that is found, because the rubbish doesn't put itself out. And the component doesn't find itself. Someone else puts the rubbish out. So now what I want you to do at home after this lesson is I want you to first revise all the pie chart vocabulary and grammar structures that we've done this evening. Learn them, write them out. Make sure you can write them out accurately and fast. And then I want you to practice writing similar information, and I want you to write about the chart that we looked about earlier using the vocabulary that we explored earlier. So I hope you can take a screenshot of this or just make a note of the percentages. I'll just read them through to you. And that was romance, 30%. Action, 25%. Comedy, 20%. Science fiction, 20%. And drama, 5%. So that gives you enough information to practice writing extending sentences exactly as the gap fill in the example we've just looked at. Just stay with that for now. In the next lesson, we're going to develop that into a paragraph with an introduction. So in the next lesson, I'll show you how to compare two pie charts, how to extend your sentences into compound and complex structures. We'll be using some linking words to do that. And I'm going to show you how to write the introduction. And basically, we'll write a full report about two pie charts. It's highly unlikely in the exam that you will be given just one pie chart, as we've seen. Very often you may get two pie charts, or you may be given a pie chart combined with a line graph, for example. And we'll look at how to write those in a later lesson. I call those multi-graphs, where we get two different kinds of charts, and we have to write about both pieces of information. But for the purposes of this lesson, we've just used one pie chart. But it's very unlikely you'll get something as simple as this. Not sure that you'd really find enough to write about to get it up to 150 words. Okay. Unless they divided the pie chart into a lot of different categories, and then you would be able to do a lot more comparing, and there would be a lot more language for you to extend, a lot more information for you to actually write about. Good. So that's all for tonight. Thank you for joining us. If you would like to email Morshed with any writing that you've done, I'll take a look at it and I can give you some feedback in the next lesson. That's all for tonight. If you'd like to know more about Future Ed, if you'd like to register for a free mock test, then please do make contact with the office and they can book a time for you to come in and do a free mock test. This will give you an idea of your level, and then you can decide, it will give you an idea of what skills you need to strengthen, and then you can take the time to work on those particular skills before you go to the expense of writing the actual IELTS test. So we'll be online next. I'll be discussing bar charts. So see you then. Goodbye from Future Ed. We look forward to hearing from you at the office.